Welcome to the healing power of yoga. I want to jump right in and start with three massive tips that you feel can help people understand the healing power of yoga. So, Caesar, we'll start with three tips before I do an introduction to who you are.
I love it. Before my three tips, I want to take this moment to acknowledge that I am on the indigenous lands of the Lenape tribes here in Manhattan, New York City. My three tips: quickly, let us find a way to create mindful movement. Then the second tip is yoga has the potential to then create a connection to self, which will then, in turn, third tip, help to collectively increase the connection to community. Mindful movement, increase self connection, community connection.
Amazing. Mindful movement, increase self connection, and what the third one was?
Connection
Create
to community.
create a massive connection to community. I love those. So we've
Yes,
actually
yes.
done all your circles. Thank you. That was Caesar Barajas, a trauma-informed certified yoga instructor, meditation and breathing technique teacher who really specializes in mindful resiliency for trauma recovery and compassion fatigue. And now, Sunaina, before I introduce you, I'd love to hear your three tips.
Prakriti. I think my three tips would be yoga has really helped me with trauma. I think it holds that kind of space for you to really deal with, because in trauma, you don't want to feel anything, you don't want to know anything. So, yoga gives you that. The second one for me would be it contains you. You know, the practice just contains you very well because it's giving you that space, it's giving you that time, and you know the pose will get over. And I think the third one is the breath. You know, knowing that something is going on and it just, you don't want to do it, but it's like breathe one, breathe two, and you're like, oh my God, I did it. So it's that feeling of joy. I think these are really the
Amazing.
healing powers.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And that really is from your personal experience and your journey with yoga as well. And Sunaina Rekhi here is a psychotherapist and a certified yoga instructor. Sunaina, you're also the first Indian woman to
Mm.
represent India in the United Nations Annual International Day of Yoga. And that's super exciting for me. So thank you very much for that. And
Thank you.
today is really all about the healing powers of yoga. And about 300 million people worldwide practice yoga. And it's been this year, it's all about yoga for humanity this year. And I think that Caesar had already mentioned the community and how important that is. So we will be talking about that today. I'm Prakriti Poddar, the Global Head of Mental Health and Wellbeing here at Round Glass. We all want to welcome you to this talk that we have with Caesar and Sunaina. Thank you so much for joining us. And Sunaina, I want to start with you. When did your journey of yoga really begin? And what drew you
It
to
was just
it?
meant to be. Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say? When did it begin?
Oh,
And
and what drew you to it?
I can't hear you, only Prakriti. Sorry. When did my
Oh, sorry.
journey of yoga start?
When did your journey with yoga begin and what brought you to it?
I think it first began as a very, very physical practice. And I remember Prakriti, I was in Bali, and this teacher said, everyone comes for different reasons. Either you come because you want to leave your children behind at home, you know, you need a break, or you come because you want to feel fit, you want to chat with your friends. You could come for any reason. But at the end, everybody reaches that same reason as you progress, you know, because everybody's at different life paths. And for me, I think first it started as physical and then it really was emotional. I think I was going through so much in my life. I remember putting down my mat at 12 o'clock in the night and saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to release the groins. I'm going to release rather than running around looking for. That was the first time I started doing the work in, where I would just lay it out in the middle of the night just to feel good, you know.
Yeah, it's really important to find that deep connection. And I know that in my
Yeah.
practice of yoga, the mat is really sacred. I mean,
Mm.
people don't consider this the sacredness of their mat. And Caesar, I'd like to actually talk with you as well about your journey and your relationship with yoga and how it started and how you've actually moved into
Thank
it and
you.
started helping people as well.
Can I just shout out how awesome it is to be here with two of the most renowned super sheroes on the planet? So to be in the power of you two lovely people is incredible. Sunaina, thank you for sharing that. My yoga journey actually began as a way to rehab a severe injury. I have been a professional dancer and performer since I was 15 years old. So that's 30 years of performing and trying to keep my body in tune with what I do. And it wasn't until I met my cohorts at the Veterans Yoga Project that I began to finally understand the connection of yoga to breath work to the internal healing. And so it began in 2015. So here I am 20 plus years in the yoga game. And it wasn't until about 7 years ago that I finally connected the dots. And so I love the idea of treating your mat as a sacred space. One of the first things I do is remind my classes, please don't step on other people's mats, please. And
Yeah.
it's for that very reason that I am trying to just let people know that there's something beyond just the physical aspect of the yoga. And so, Nana, you touched upon it in regards to like your own healing. Thank you.
Yeah. I
Thank you.
mean, I remember when I was a kid, my journey started like when I was in grade four, 1984, really long back. And I was in boarding school and we were forced to do yoga. And
Wow.
you know, when you're 9 years old and you're being forced to do yoga, it was really, you know, it was like, why am I even doing this? But the funny thing is, right, cut to like literally just a year while because it was a yoga sort of experience for the whole year, I started to recognize sort of the power of my body, but
Mm.
also the power of my mind on my body. And you know, as a kid, when you get that knowledge, and I used to be a tennis player, so it was like I became really in tune with my game, with my body, with the movements, with what I needed to stretch. You know, it was like having a microscopic vision of your internal being. And I, you know, learned that as a child, and really after that, when I started my own practice in Bombay, uh, I use a lot of yoga and somatic healing work, and you know, because they need to take it home, so it becomes a prescription for them as we sort of pass this on to them. So yoga really is. And in India, I know, Sonena, you probably know this, and Caesar, I don't know if you know this, but before you enter a yoga hall, you actually do worship the room before you come in.
Mm.
Like you do not step in without, you know, without gratitude, and then you come in.
Acknowledgement.
So,
Yes.
and I love that you started with sacred space. I mean, yes, you know, this land is our sacred space, and we really need to understand that everything we do is a celebration of that sacred space. Talking about celebrations, we're having this conversation because we're celebrating International Yoga Day. And I really wanted to break it up into four parts. Yoga for people is unfortunately, you know, physical exercise, you know, for, and I mean, I feel so bad when people think of it as physical exercise. I mean, it's not really only about flexibility, strength, resilience, and wisdom. It's about all of that, right? It's about flexibility, it's about strength, it's about resilience, and it's about wisdom.
Mm.
And whenever I see what's happening in the yoga world, and now that I'm in the US, I kind of like see more and more what's happening in the yoga world. I go to some yoga classes and I'm like, this is not yoga, right? I'm like, this is exercise. And just because you're flexible doesn't mean you're good at yoga. Just because you can do a bend and a backward bend doesn't mean you know yoga. There's overextension that is not being considered. There's mental extension that people are
Mm.
not focusing on when it comes to yoga. They're talking about the chakras, but there's no real depth of understanding what those cycles of energy really are. So I really want to talk about it in a way where we break it down, right? Where we understand how does yoga help with flexibility, and I do not want to restrict flexibility to just the body, because of the interaction between what happens with yoga is always mind, body, and spirit. So Caesar, for you, if you could talk about your flexibility, journey of flexibility, and how you use that even when you work with others, and guide them to their own internal flexibility.
Ooh, I want to drop the mic after you gave that, because, American yoga, I'm with you on that. I digress to come back to the question. The idea of flexibility is really a state of one's unique being. And so part of what I try to inform people is that Sunaina's flexibility is not going to be mine. My flexibility is not going to be Prakriti's. So if we can be in a position to understand that yoga is most definitely, first and foremost, the connection to you, your breath, your mat. And so we live in an American society, I'm New Yorker, where everything is comparative. And so if you come into a place where you're judging your flexibility, you're missing out on 100 other aspects of what yoga can potentially be. Case in point, my father is, thank source and the goodness that is the universe, recovering from cancer treatments. And at 77 years old, over the last 2 years, took on daily yoga practice. And now is stronger, leaner, more flexible. So in the sense of flexibility, yes, we can increase some of it, but it all depends on what it is that you're doing in the overall mindset. So yoga, wholesome eating, nutritious foods, trying to remain as stress-free as possible in this dumpster fire of a world we live in. So idea of flexibility can be improved. If you don't have it, it's okay, because this isn't about having it or not having it. But yoga is one of those tremendous ways to increase flexibility, increase strength, give you mental and spiritual and physical and soulful stamina and endurance. I digress. Thank you. Because I'll talk forever about this stuff.
That's why you're here. Sunaina, for you, tell me about your experience with flexibility. And like I said, not just in the body, but if you've worked with people who've been very rigid in their thinking, how has flexibility, or the journey of flexibility, really sort of broken through that?
I think that's a great question, Prakriti, and thank you, Caesar. So for me, I feel that flexibility, earlier I used to look at somebody and say, how can they think like this? How can they be like this? And then I realized that I'm not open. If I am not flexible enough to understand their point of view, and I think my point of view is absolute, then I need flexibility. And that kind of really worked for me to say, who am I? If I can't understand them, I have no flexibility. And earlier I used to think, you know what, I know this, so I can teach it to you. And I used to be like, I used to actually feel shocked. How can you not? And then I realized that I'm not understanding them. So I think one, of course, I think, like you said, it's not just physical. But for me, like even a physical thing is a very mental thing. I remember in the car when I had to increase flexibility, I would put my leg, the car handles, I would like actually do this to my leg and hold it the whole way for like 20, 25 minutes for that flexibility. But one is you want to create flexibility, but one is how much do you want it is discipline. How hard you work is hard work. How much you utilize your mind to work your physical. The gym is not physical for me. I think people who go to the gym have to really bring all their consciousness together to kind of be like, okay, let's do it one more time, because it's not easy. But when you do it, when you do all of this, like you said, yoga is really from within, like your mind. And as we keep learning, we just keep, if we've learned something physically, something's happened spiritually. If we've learned something spiritually, something could have happened mentally. It's such an amazing place that we are all in. It's like we are always learning, and that awareness and accepting who we are. I don't mind if anyone tells me anything bad about me, because I've already reached a place where I'm like, you know what, this is something I need to work on. This is something I need to work a little So you don't feel so much ego either, you know.
Yeah.
I think it reduces your ego.
Yeah.
Like how you
I love
said,
that.
Caesar, it's not about the flexibility, what you do, what she does, and that is where you don't play with ego anymore. And that's hard. Like every time I'm talking, I'm like, is this an ego sentence? And 50% of the sentences are ego sentences. And I'm like, what am I teaching? Let's change the sentence. It can't be so ego filled, you know?
I
But
love that.
yeah,
I mean, so you're saying basically your practice of yoga and flexibility increases your capability of being non-judgmental and truly listening. And
yeah,
I think that's really incredible. I mean, in what we in therapy, it's one of actually the tools that you give to people. Like what we used to do in our therapy center was actually if somebody was rigid in their thoughts and their thinking and really was also working with relationships, we asked them to work on their relationship with themselves, which means where are you at right now with your body and mind? Where are you at right now? Give me the physical depiction of it, because you can see physically if a person can touch their toes or if their person can do a back bend, etc. And you get them while they're journaling. I know that journaling is a big part of like therapy, so we do consider that, but we also journal our own metamorphosis as we start using yoga for flexibility and training and conditioning the mind. So I love the fact that both of you have talked about the sort of the functionality as it transcends just the body and moves into the mind. And I think that that is one of the key things when we're talking about yoga and the power to heal, is the fact that you may be working on, and this is really great, by the way, that you may be working on only your toes, right? Putting the space between your
yeah,
toes. But what you're really working
exactly.
on is right here, and the
Yes,
connection of
yeah.
all the stuff that you can make happen if you just focus. So I love that. Thank you so much for that. You have a course, Nana, with Round Glass that really talks about, feeling good in the body. And you start with the feet. You start with those toes. I would really like to show a little bit about what that is, and then have you talk about the importance of strength beginning in the feet.
The toes. I think I get it from Kama Sutra in India. I think it all starts with the toes. I think I was like, I'm from India. No, but jokes apart, I really feel it in the toes. It's so much grounding. Like, I think even with Ayurveda and all, it's like I'm always barefoot. I love it. I just love it. Like, and I think I grew up in South Africa, and I remember we used to go to malls and beach. We were always barefoot, even in malls when we were young kids. So bare feet for us was like normal. And I just love that connection with the earth. I love how, because everything's growing out of that yumminess, our hands and our feet, like the extremities. It's um, it's good. And then it goes up. Like I remember, if you're having the hip pain, it might not be because you're doing something wrong with the hip. It's because you couldn't be standing right. Either if your toes are here, your alignment is here. If your toes shift a little bit, the whole alignment of your knee, your hip, everything is changing, you know? So it's very important, I think, in yoga, they say, right, the Tadasana. Like I remember when I did a teacher training, I used to be in Tadasana for like 20 minutes with a block between my thighs. You remember this, Prakriti? Have you done this
Yeah, yeah,
exercise,
yeah, I
Caesar?
know it.
That when you externally rotate and you're squeezing the block. And I
Yeah,
remember like it just created so much energy, like that chi, the
yeah,
dantian, they say in Qigong. But you
yeah.
create that much energy in you.
It's
So it's
amazing. So that
beautiful.
is the strength that we're moving on to. So you've actually graduated us from flexibility to strength. I know, Caesar, you're doing a lot of
Strength.
work with yoga, with strength, and with peer-to-peer support. What does that work really look like?
It's actually been my only saving grace. There's so much that you both have already shared that resonates deeply. If I may share very briefly, my own personal healing journey is 47 plus years in the making. And even though I found yoga as a way to physically rehab my body, I didn't understand that it was laying the foundations for the last 12 years of my own emotional sobriety, which is something that I term because, as with any kind of substance abuse, there are things that people are addicted to. And having grown up in a traumatic way, having been exposed, having been inundated with things that don't feel good, and these are the little t traumas and these are the capital T traumas. The peer-to-peer support stems from my own experiences. And so, Sunaina, hearing you speak of like the connection of feet to the earth, it wasn't until I was sitting with my shaman in Mexico after a Temazcal ceremony and his connection and explanation of feet in conjunction to your journey, being able to understand the number of miles, the mountains that you've climbed, the sheer crappy mierda that you've walked through to get to where you are right now. And so my peer-to-peer support is mostly done with an organization called the Everyman. And so I am not only a certified men's emotional leadership facilitator, I group facilitate peer-to-peer support, men and women. And we're all gender conforming. I have been an activist and an advocate for the LGBTQIA 2S plus community for 30 plus years. And so yoga is also another way to introduce folks to something that is primarily viewed as female-centered, as white female-centered. And so can we bring peer-to-peer support from someone like me, a cisgendered, heterosexual identifying man who paints his nails, is a ballerina in real life? Can I be in a position to be gender non-conforming? Can I be in a position then to share with people that we do nothing alone? And so, yes, this is why yoga to self is detrimental, but yoga then opportunes people a chance to connect with the community. And right now, the community at large, as a global community, has problems with people of color, with women. If you speak out, mental health, there are no avenues of support globally. And so part of the reason why, when I was sitting in a jail cell a number of times over my life, after yet relationship breakup, I'm like, yo, what the is wrong? Nothing's wrong. This is my body reacting to the shit that I've survived for 40 years. And then you add in America here, the civil unrest, the judicial unrest, the blatant misogyny and oppression and mistreatment. And so my peer-to-peer support then avenued into not just men, not just women, but then BIPOC men, anybody who's male identifying and identifies as Black, Indigenous, person of color, I will sit with and we chat. So this is just as healing as it is for me. Because no lie, straight up truth, October of 2020, I was sitting in a jail cell. The reason doesn't matter, but it is important to highlight that that's a part of who I was and a part of the ever shifting and ever evolving reformed human that I'm trying to be. And it's a lifelong process. So please understand that yoga will take you places. And like Sunaina mentioned, if you can put yourself in a place to discipline yourself for it, because the benefits, oh my God, you guys, the benefits, my friends, the benefits are so vast, so vast. Thank you.
It really is. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing as well. I think one of the most crucial elements I've got from what you've just said is the total non-judgment towards yourself as well. I think that is so key.
Amazing.
It is so key. You know, you can be a yoga expert practitioner for 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years and come back to the mat every day and you're shifting in either a good way or a bad way. It doesn't always progress. Sometimes it regresses as well based on your emotional state on that mat, on that day, at that time. And I know in therapy, you know, whenever we talk about these things, we always say, what is right for you at this moment of your life will come to you. And that is a total non-judgment. I mean, look at nature. We just talked about nature. You talked about, okay, putting your feet on the ground, connecting with earth. It shifts constantly. Change is constant. It shifts constantly. So the more the more open we are to those changes. And I think somebody told me, oh, I love your name, Prakriti. That seems so, you know, Prakriti means nature. It seems so peaceful. And I'm like, nature peaceful? Like, 1 second. Can you go back and check what nature really means? I mean, tornadoes are part of nature. Tsunamis are part of nature. And of course, the breeze is part of nature. I mean, it's ever changing. And so therefore, when you look at, and something I think we talk about in yoga a lot is learn from nature, learn from the things around you. And that is never constant. So you are in constant motion, growing, backtracking, moving forward. And we have a question here from somebody who's sort of shared their question. It's Tanya, who's a mother of three. So let's play that and then talk a little bit about that.
When I was 19, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the mindfulness of yoga really helped me get through that treatment and that time and period in my life. And now that I'm in my later 40s, how do I get that mindfulness back into kind of like an everyday life, and also incorporate, the physical aspects of yoga, and in putting myself first. I'm not as flexible. I'm not as young and skinny as I once was. And how do I get back into that? And the whole mindfulness of yoga really, truly is something dear to my heart, because that truly is something that helped me at such a fragile time in my life.
Any advice for Tonya, guys? Yep. Caesar.
I would love to jump in if you don't mind. Tanya, thank you so much for that question. Celebrating you, honoring you as a wonderful human, as a super mom. The idea of mindfulness, my friend, doesn't stem in movement. So please understand, within the yoga realm or the yoga world, for simplicity's sake, the asanas or the movements or the poses like cow pose, cat pose, that's one element of what yoga encompasses. So mindfulness can be as simple as giving yourself a chance to take 2 deep breaths, the deepest, fullest breaths you can possibly take, where the top of the chest rises, rib cage expands, belly inflates. And then you're doing pranayama work. The idea of giving yourself a chance then to step as best as you can, step away from comparing yourself to what was. Comparison is the thief of all joy. So yes, at one point, my friend, you were smaller, you were skinnier. At one point also, you weren't a mom. At one point, you weren't 48, you were 28. All of it, as Prakriti was sharing, shifts. So mindfulness can begin with something as simple as getting up from one end of the couch and moving to the other, because you mindfully moved. As the great theologian, teacher, my mentor, Thich Nhat Hanh speaks to, you can wash the dishes and find mindfulness. So if you want any additional advice, please feel free to reach out to any of us. But that's in its simplest form. Mindfulness doesn't have to include the asana practice of yoga. Thank you.
Thank you. Sunaina, I'd love your thoughts.
Hi, Tanya. What's up? Tanya, I think sometimes I feel that the biggest lies we are saying are to ourselves. We are lying. So the moment we start to hear those thoughts, and you can actually face yourself, and this is going to happen a lot, you'll have to keep facing. But when you're able to just face yourself, that acceptance first before awareness. And then, okay, we become aware. We start doing stuff like how Caesar said, it's not in the movement. It's in your life. So I feel that when you want to get into it, you don't even have to think about it. You just have to get into it. Put your mat out, sit on it, and start the practice. It's as simple as that. And when you start, you'll be like, oh my God, I'm so glad that I did it. I didn't regret it. It'll just be that. It's as simple as that, because you're not losing anything. Like how Prakriti said, sometimes you'll gain, but you're mostly coming there to gain. You're getting a gift. Why won't you take it for free? Like, take it. Like, put your mat out, put a class on, go to a class. It's in every moment that we feel good. And you just have to choose, okay, you know what, today I want to dance, like you said, 2 deep breaths. I actually was like, Tanya, do it right now. The two deep breaths Caesar's saying, because that breath or that inhalation creates so much joy in us. And that's all it is. It doesn't have to be a full practice. It can be 3 deep breaths, or it can be just inhaling up, and that's mindfulness. I remember just doing one pose for 5 minutes when I used to feel something, and that was my practice for the day. I didn't do anything else. I just stayed in that pose for 5 minutes, but I practiced. I still said, I have practiced today. I have not put whether I'll practice for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I put those sense of time. So that would also be another thing. Don't put time. Like you could do something just for a minute, just for 5 minutes, but do it every day. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 30 minutes. It doesn't matter.
I love
So
those.
yeah.
I love that micro nudges for you in the day, because that really does create that habit. Thanks a lot for that,
It
Sunaina. Tanya,
does.
I hope that really helps you, because I love the fact that you were saying that it isn't the amount of time you put into it. It's the intention and the mindful intention that you have, even if that's a minute. And Caesar, just that breath, when somebody is in a state of stress, just that breath once is enough. And I remember, we don't have that much time, so I can't go into like stories about yoga, because I have so many, and because I learned from these people sitting in the hills in the Himalayas who won't come down. Like right now, I'm building courses in yoga, and I'm like, can you please come down? And they're like, in Hindi, hum to yahi karte hai, which means this is all we do. We are not coming down. We're not even coming on camera. Like, what are you talking about, right? Because they're not yoga teachers. They're yogis. That's what they do, right? And I love that every time I'm like, I remember this one person was very vocal, and every time I said, just today maybe I shouldn't do that much, he'd be like, in Hindi again, saying invoke the Bhairavi, which is invoke that, invoke that's so Indian the Bhairavi is a very, very strong Indian woman. I mean, very strong woman, right? And most women they're considered that manifestation of strength, which is women. So he would be like, what do you say? Invoke the Bhairavi. And he'd like, give me like that really like tug, like, oh my God, you have a purpose in life. You cannot be saying that today you don't feel like doing it. Like there was always that reset in my head with, hey, you know what? So when I go to yoga class and it's all very smooth and very quiet and very calm, and I'm like, this is also like inner strength invoking. It doesn't have to be like all like shanti, 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 because it depends on what you're going through, right? And if you need that rigor to feel that person that you really are, find those people. We have so many different types of teachers. Both of you are teachers, and we have like, at least even in round class, but across the globe on the internet, so many different types of teachers who you can probably resonate with, and nobody resonates with only one kind of teacher. Like, I want that teacher that's telling me that I'm full of shit and I need to move beyond it. I want that teacher, right? And some people don't. Some people have that in their daily life and really want calm. And there's no correct way. So, I want to thank you both, and both your skills and both your personalities are so, it's so beautiful to see how different people are and how they connect. And you both seem so amazing. And I mean, I love the work that you guys do. And Caesar, we don't have a course with you, but I'm hoping to have a course with you soon. And Sunaina, your course on sort of feel good in the
Coming.
body on Round Glass is coming soon. It's right here on our Round
Yes.
Glass app, and I'd really like people to actually watch it and go through it. So thank you for joining us and being here
Thank
today.
you.
And this is all the time, unfortunately, that we have. But what we have talked about is healing through yoga, and both of you brought up a lifestyle of holistic well-being through yoga and also nutrition, exercise, movement, etc. Um, I'm Prakriti Poddar, and I am holistic well-being.